Hey again, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget about our contests. Hashtag Russia18 picks for the upcoming World Cup and hashtag Tiangong down. Give us the date that you think that space station is going to crash, since apparently nobody knows. And you could win Litecoin prizes. How about that? So for our last couple segments of the week, I wanted to cover something in some respects because I was talking to Mr. Kirk about it. It's a controversial subject, to say the very least, but let's talk about abductions for a few minutes. Now, we'd like to attempt, anyway, to give fair and clear treatment to all of this kind of material, right? So we're going to be discussing facts. We're not just wandering off wherever you think this thing could go. We're going to try to stick to stories, okay? I'd like to discuss first the case of a William Schaffner. A few weeks ago, when telling Tim some of the more interesting leads that I wanted to follow to illustrate the subject of UFOs and ufology, this was a case that I had specifically mentioned to him because it had stayed with me after I had read about it. So the story of William Schaffner goes something like this. It's September of 1970. We're talking about U.S. Air Force Captain William Schaffner. He is in something called an XS-894 Lightning, an F-6. He's a pilot stationed at Royal Air Force Base Binbrook in, I guess it's northeast England, and he's doing something called Quick Reaction Alert Duty. His call sign, if I read all this information correctly, because I per se was not in the military, his call sign is Foxtrot 94. Now, there are claims of transparent spheres being seen, unusual radar signals being picked up, and newspaper reports pieced together a number of unexplained or unusual sightings that were happening around the time of this incident. There's actual newspaper reports of this stuff. So on September 8th, 1970, Captain Schaffner was scrambled in what may have been a response to one of these events, according to the narrative that's been put forth by certain UFO researchers. Ultimately encountering these unusual phenomena, described at one point as specifically a transparent sphere and some sort of a flying cone. Again, we're just off the northeast coast of England. Transcripts were apparently leaked between the flight Foxtrot 94 and the Binbrook control tower. They were leaked, reviewed, and described in a 1994 series of articles that was published by a newspaper called the Grimsby Telegraph. Now, one report stated that the objects that Schaffner encountered and described were much faster and far more maneuverable than his F-6. Sources speculate that Schaffner's equipment malfunctioned, possibly from direct contact with the objects that he was describing, and that he crashed into the heavy seas or was forced to ditch a couple of miles out. The resulting search and rescue operation was covered extensively by the local press, and it took Royal Navy divers a month just to find the plane. The plane itself was eventually brought back to the surface that December. Okay, we're talking 3 months later. And the canopy of the airplane was still closed with no one inside. Captain Schaffner's body has never been recovered. Allegedly, there were further reports that the resulting investigation was repeatedly tampered with and that evidence went missing or was stolen. Now, in 2002, there was a major shift in this story. The British Ministry of Defense released and declassified files pertaining to this incident, which seemed to clearly outline that this was just an unfortunate accident with no references in the reports that could be connected to UFOs. The F-6 was conducting a NATO air defense drill and was scrambled to pursue another NATO craft that was acting as a Soviet intruder. The declassified files indicated there was bad weather and heavy seas, that Captain Schaffner lost control of the aircraft, possibly from flying too low, perhaps from malfunctioning equipment, and he ended up crashing into the ocean. Further, Former Ministry of Defense official Nick Pope, who is widely known for his many appearances and comments on the UFO subject. He's appeared on the History Channel series Ancient Aliens numerous times. Anybody that watches that show would know who he is. Pope was among several people that was arguing on behalf of Captain Schaffner's two sons, who were apparently pretty upset that the UFO story was even circulating. And frankly, this is where UFO research really gets complicated all the time, because there always seems to be a story, then there's a rational explanation that seems to surface, and yet somehow the mystery just hangs in the air. Now, I have to say, I greatly respect the wishes of the two sons who suffered the tragic loss of their father and now perhaps feel worse because of the UFO story, which they believe to be absurd and discredited. Nick Pope actually published an email where he was responding to a comments thread about the 1970 RAF Binbrook incident. I included a link to this specific email in the show notes, and quoting Pope, quote, "I met Schaffner's sons and talked them through the circumstances of the accident. They had been distressed by the rumors surrounding the death of their father and were grateful to the MOD for its openness in helping answer their questions concerning his tragic death." End quote. Now, for multiple reasons I won't go into here, this case is still considered unsolved by some ufology researchers. Not all of them. I'm always open to new information. It is hard not to understand some of the evidence they say is relevant and demands further examination if what they're presenting is authentic. But for now, I personally am perfectly willing to accept the official explanation because, frankly, it seems complete and plausible, except for one thing, which is the provable, documentable fact that there were literally dozens of other concurrent UFO sightings going on in the area before, during, and after the time of this incident. You can't shake that part, so it's very difficult to come to a conclusion if you ask me, but you want to be respectful to the family, and obviously, that's an important facet of all of this. Okay. In our next and last segment for the week, a surprising follow-up on last week's Leslie Kean story, and I just told you the story of Captain Schaffner for a couple of reasons, including new abduction stuff for you aspiring researchers to dig into to see what you think of it. So we'll be back in just a minute.
22nd Century Radio.